Pirate-first marketing is going to be quite a leap from where we just were. But I've been listening intently to everything and really wish that I'd known it a few months ago, because 5 months ago, my first ever book came out. I'm going to tell you the story of the book because I think there's some useful analogies for marketeers, and certainly as introduced us looking to the future by looking to the past, but because I feel like I'm amongst friends, colleagues, comrades, and fellow pirates in marketing, I thought I'd also tell you the truth. Because the truth is, I'm an absolute imposter. I completely feel, every single time I'm introduced as a best-selling author, I'm still looking over my shoulder, hoping to meet a best-selling author, and then realizing it's me. Because 5 months ago, I was not an author at all. 8 months ago, I left Liberty, my agency of 18 years. I got my P45 the same time that the book manuscript was due, the same week that my second daughter was born in December last year. I'd always said when I started Liberty up, I was leaving my first agency, Don't Panic, to start Liberty. So I've always worked in and around youth marketing. And I was 24 at the time, and I said, when I'm 40, I will step aside. I set 40 because when I was 24, 40 seemed like, as far away as death. And obviously then it rolled around, and it turns out it wasn't such a joke anymore, and the team were there, like really with the door open. And this became my distraction project, handing over to a new team, a new CEO, a new team that are actually running the business far better than I ever managed in 18 years. And I knew I needed something that would fill my space and time, but I had absolutely no intention whatsoever that anyone was ever going to read this thing. So I spoke into it with more honesty than perhaps I have, sometimes even as a marketeer, where honesty, is usually there in our intentions, but isn't always there in the actions. So hopefully there'll be a bridge between your lived experience and sometimes the things we want to say and the things we could and should be doing. The first person to see a copy of the book was my daughter. She's 5.5 years old. She's called Scarlett, and she gave me probably the most accurate and cutting review that I've had. She took a quick look through the book, and she said, "Daddy, how have you managed to write a book about pirates with no pictures in it?" Shit, yeah. You're absolutely right. It would have been so much better with some pictures in it. And she said, "Well, Daddy, what's it about?" And I said, "Well, here as we head towards the midpoint of the 21st century, we've inherited a series of rules that kind of really belong in the 20th century, and the biggest driver of change in our world has become capitalism and all the businesses that we've got as part of it. And whilst we've been massively let down by the traditional institutions of change and leadership, politics, wherein there's really only a vacuum of imagination, our businesses really need an upgrade because the business model of the latter part of the 20th century was largely exploitation. And if we continue with our businesses pumping out negativity into the world, we're on a fucking short track to doom. The only way out of this that I can see is some real professional rule breaking, which is going to get us out of that, because let's be honest, nobody works in a business that is, even with the best instincts of transformation, moving anywhere near to the pace of disruption that's taking place outside. Scarlett said, "You what?" She got a gist and she went to school, and I got a call that week from the deputy principal saying, "What's happened to Scarlett? She's usually such a good girl and she's like throwing things off the desks." And actually she didn't call me, she called my wife, so I was in much more trouble than that. My wife's Mexican and quite strong-minded. So to try and bring this to life to my daughter, the book was out in May, and in June this statue was unveiled in Parliament Square of Millicent Fawcett. And so I took her up to Parliament Square to introduce her to a rule breaker, a pioneering rule breaker that we should all be giving thanks to. And I said, "Scarlett, without this woman breaking rules, you would not have the rights that you have. When this woman was alive, you wouldn't have been regarded of equal capacity, capability, or even intelligence. You wouldn't have many of the opportunities. The things you want to grow up and do wouldn't have all been available to you if this woman hadn't done what was considered to be the wrong thing because she knew it was the right thing. And in the time that she lived, risked everything she had, her reputation, her values, her family, and even her life, to fight to break the rules of the hour because she knew they were wrong." She just about got that. And she started asking me the stories of the other statues in Parliament Square. And I don't know them all from my GCSE history, but I knew a few. And I realised something. It dawned on me that every single statue that I knew the story of, certainly that we look up to, is there because they broke the rules. We don't make statues for people who just follow orders. But it's very difficult to know. I began to think it's like artists, great painters, who are rarely really appreciated for their art in the time that they're in. But their prescience comes out to play over time. And I think really good rule breaking is an art. Professional rule breaking, which is what I'd like to present to you, a fine art. My measure for professional rule breaking, by the way, just to be clear, is nearly getting fired once a year. That means you're in the right zone. You're pushing it. Obviously, getting fired would be too much, but nearly getting fired suggests that actually you're bringing some innovation, change, and a bit of disruption, like the real meaning of those words. And I think it's necessary, because there's no shortage of conventions, rules, and status quos that really need challenging. You know, this particular dickhead needs no introduction, but does need a hell of a lot of challenge. Sorry, I got the timing wrong. I didn't mean the polar bear, who may or may not be a dickhead. But you get the point. You know what I mean. And I think that what I mean is that the only thing more stupid than some of the rules that we follow are the people following them, which puts the onus upon you, my friends. It puts the onus upon all of us. We have a really simple choice to make. We know full well a lot of the ways that we've been doing things are not the ways we should be doing things. And the biggest mistake we can make is to believe that the way things are the way things have to be. And that puts the choice on all of us. And when I say all of us, obviously, I mean you. So we know the situation that we're in. We know, particularly because we're in marketing, so we know what comes next. And we know this. The output of much of the way that we've been operating is extreme social inequality. Not often seen as extremely as this in the Sao Paradiso favelas, but if you want a shorthand for what this takes us to, the levels of poverty it takes us to, the levels of extremism that it creates, the rise of populism that it's connected to, a simple point of the output of the worst ways that we've been operating for some time. You cannot separate these things completely. And there's something coming. I started Liberty in 2001. It took us about 6 years to land any significant work. This idea of purpose-led marketing, of only doing work that would truly make commercial and social impact, was very, very hard to get off the ground. My last act as CEO, I picked up the Grand Prix at the Beamer Awards for a shift that we've made in the industry. That took 17 years to pull an industry in this direction. We know that purpose-led marketing is quite commonplace. It's hard to sometimes put a real skewer in what purpose means, but that's a different conversation. So if that was prescient in 2001, I was to predict another 18 years in the future, I would strongly predict that non-circular business, i.e. business and manufacturing that contributes to landfill, will begin to look like a war crime. That image sums it up for me. 20 years ago, that would have undoubtedly been thought of as a war zone. Now I'm sure you immediately recognized it as palm oil deforestation. Put that 8 years past the 12-year deadline that we've been given by the UN climate change and try and make something that's non-circular. And we, particularly us as marketeers and advertisers, have a particular challenge on our hands. So we do predict the future. We do influence our clients, we are strategy, and we do know what's coming next. So we have a really important choice, because we live in a world that's 60% over its biosphere capacity, 60% over its biosphere capacity, heading towards deadlines that we do not have plans to meet. And yet some of us are still involved in selling brands associated with natural resources that we cannot replenish, and we're selling them on the back of values that are important and meaningful to humanity, and we're stealing those and selling shit that the world doesn't need on the back of it. So what the fuck is the real brief to advertising if we're heading towards a lesser growth environment as one of the only real logical answers to the challenges that we've got? Then what is our goal? What is our job? How do we do brilliant and successful creative work using all the tools at our disposal in a less growth market? How does advertising, if consumerism is unarguably to some degree suicide, how does advertising avoid being the signature on humanity's own suicide note? That, I think, is our creative brief. And that's the brief I'm certainly interested in. And I know we've had some very interesting topics around technology, and sometimes there is this suggestion that it's going to save us. My real interest has been working with young innovators and entrepreneurs the world over, throughout my career at Liberty, but particularly in the formation of this book. And there is this kind of notion that some really smart people are going to build an app that are going to get us out of this. But I, for one, am going to be goddamned if I give the Uberization of anything as the future business model of anything ever again. The truth is there's an over-reliance and deference in a certain direction to all the answers that are going to come down this way and save us. It's simply not true. You know it's not. No one is coming to save us. And if that sounds a little bit doomy, I don't mean it to be. I just mean it as a statement of fact. I spent my entire career working with successive prime ministers, cabinet offices, the EU administration, the highest levels of every single business and institution I've worked with. And throughout certainly my 30s, I kept thinking that one day I was going to be introduced to the grown-ups, the ones with a real master plan. Certainly every time at number 10, there must be, so under the stairs, some real secret ninja civil servants who actually have got the long-term plan. You don't need me to tell you that they do not exist. There isn't a long-term master plan. This does come down to us. The biggest wheels of change are our industry, our capitalism. And there are wheels of change that have previously done great things and can do again. But the plan isn't out there. The plan needs to be written. The plan does come down to you, because those levers aren't there. I've already been clear about some of my political allegiances, but when it comes to challenging them, I don't have many opportunities other than some really good memes, and I've got really good memes. Right, and I will share yours if you'll share mine, and maybe that will change the world, but I fucking doubt it. There's got to be more. I've searched hard, I've thought hard, I've written this book very, very carefully, and the word that I came back to was rebellion. And I know it's a very strong word, and it depends on your experience, whether that word might mean violence, it might mean conflict within communities. It is a strong word, and I intentionally mean it as a strong word. I mean it as a sexy, cool Star Wars kind of rebellion, of course, because that's the kind of rebellion that I would like to have, but I do mean rebellion and nothing less. Because when we look to history to try and understand the future, we have to look beyond some of the narrowness of our scope. We have to look beyond quarterly targets. We have to look beyond client retention. We have to look beyond some of the objectives we've got within our businesses. We have to pan out to the biggest challenges, the ones that I said at the beginning. They have to be within the aperture of our business objectives. They simply have to be. They can't not be. If you choose not to be, then you are part of the problem. We have to push in this direction. And so we have to look to role models and heroes who did change the world. And I think that I found the role models for our hour. Here. There. And you were with me until that point, weren't you? And suddenly there's this kind of cold cloud of skepticism. What the fuck, doesn't he know? I thought he'd written a book about history. Is he suggesting that the pirates would sit alongside the civil rights movement and the suffragettes? What a disgrace. Yeah, I absolutely am. Absolutely, because the true story of pirates is not known. The true story of pirates is of social revolutionaries and working class heroes that absolutely deserve to be on this spectrum. And if you will grant me, I'd like to spend a few minutes with a quick pirate history lesson, because it turns out very few people, and I certainly didn't up until about a year ago, know the true story. So, this is the notion of Be More Pirate. This is what it's for and what it's about. I've spent the last 18 months, really, since my departure from Liberty, researching this as thoroughly as I can. It's taken me around the world. I was so aware of the cliche of middle-aged, middle-class, white dude, leaves marketing agency, becomes public speaker and author. I've clearly not avoided it. But I did not want this book to be like the 42-year-old pontifications of perspectives and tell you what I think it should be. So I wrote it in the heat of the fire. And I took it to my offices in South Africa, so Mamelodi and Soweto and Johannesburg. I work with entrepreneur networks in the States. So I went to Baltimore, Illinois, Detroit, Chicago, to reverse diaspora of young entrepreneurs going back to Athens to help prop up that economy, from Brixton to Bradford, and every single place that I could find. Real innovation taking place outside client briefs and our business models. Real innovation that are propping shit up and predicting the future with sustainable models behind it. And I workshopped this. I workshopped it hard to make sure that the metaphor was relevant and the structure within the book led to real change. Because the world doesn't need any more inspiration, right? Inspiration without action is frustration, or talk minus action equals shit. And I don't take that gig anymore. I don't want to be the inspirational speaker. I'm only interested now in action. So that's what this book is about. But I do know that I begin from this point, right? So it's always good to begin any campaign understanding exactly where you sit. The baseline of expectation for pirates is probably this. This is not the reality. This is the reality. So, over here, my friends, we have Black Sam Bellamy, age 28. He was the first of all the billionaire pirates, and he made his fortune stealing the already stolen Spanish gold. But it wasn't that infamy that gave rise to his fame. It was his articulate and eloquent execution of justice, liberty, and fairness upon the open seas. And that's what gave him the name of the Robin Hood of pirates. And over here, we've got Edward Teach, a.k.a. Blackbeard. We will come back to him because he was really one of us. He was the archetype of the modern pirate brand. And so dedicated was he to living this pirate brand that he would set to sulphurous fuses at the end of his beard so that he would rain down a terrifying vision upon his victims, not because he was a psychopath, quite the opposite. There is no recorded history whatsoever of Blackbeard killing anyone. It was because he was an excellent marketeer and he knew that his brand would deliver to his bottom line. The profit return was never when there was conflict, and actually Blackbeard is a direct representation of why the pirates were some of the least violent, not the most violent people on the seas at the time. And here we've got Black Caesar, one of the many black pirates, because the pirates 150 years before the fight for abolition of slavery took place in the United States, the pirates were regularly releasing slaves and introducing them and including them within their community with equal rights, equal say, and equal pay. And here on that kind of tip, we've got Anne Bonny, far and away my favourite of all the different pirate stories that exist. Her demonstrating with her fearless leadership that the only place on earth that women gave and afforded an opportunity of equal responsibility and leadership was underneath the black flag. If you want an example of how these guys were looked at the time, you could do worse than this kind of analogy. Because they weren't everybody's hero, they weren't everybody's role model, but they were certainly a role model of innovation and a new way of doing things that represented a different approach across the sea. And they were. Their stories spanned the world. Or, as for a little bit more detail, I've touched on the idea of pirate branding. We think as marketeers that it was Coca-Cola with their signature swoosh that invented the idea of the global brand. Of course it wasn't. It was the golden age of pirates who came up with the skull and crossbones, bastardizing the main communication, the only international communication systems of the time, which was the flag system, hacking it with a black flag that wasn't allowed, adding a skull and all sorts of symbols of death, with a singular message, which as marketeers we know is the right way to go, surrender or die. And we can come back to the morality of that. But as I've already said, that there was a huger story that they were telling than actually the truth. And that drove their business model, and drove a very successful one. At their peak, the pirates were outnumbered, the golden age of pirates were outnumbered 45-1. And they took on the world and won. Through not their might or their force or their strategy, but the power of their brand. But we can go on. Within their business models, they were the first organizations to see dual governance, the checks and balances that keep most of our organizations in check. The captain had equal responsibility to the quartermaster. Quartermaster was in charge of culture, captain in charge of strategy. They had social insurance on board pirate ships before anywhere else in the world. If I was to lose a leg, that would be 800 pieces of 8, and an arm, 600 pieces of 8. They designed workplace compensation before anyone else had even seen it, before it became law, before it became a human right. Universal suffrage on board a pirate ship over 200 years before it finally got enacted was seen. Every single person had equal say on all matters, more democratic than even Athenian democracy, where of course only the white blokes had the vote. Pay equality, I don't have a modern comparison for this one yet, but I'm sure we'll get there one day. There was total pay equality, there was no gender pay gap on board a pirate ship, and there was an index link between the highest and the lowest pay. And I could go on. The diversity quotas on board pirate ships would make most of our modern and most progressive organizations eyes water. Facilitative leadership, holocratic business models, self-organizing teams. I mean, the level of innovation in this 30-odd year period is pronounced. It can only compete with like the dawn of Silicon Valley or perhaps the turn of the 19th century. It's true, this is all historical fact, but it's the story that was not told because it's the story that represented such a great threat. And if you're still not with me, it wasn't just their business innovations. Outside of that, the pirates were the first people to have a written form of same-sex marriage, so sophisticated it even had an inheritance clause. And if you're still not with me, the pirates invented the cocktail. True story. Mint, lime, sugar, and rum, aka a mojito. True. 1590, which was long before the old-fashioned was deemed to be invented in New York in the 1890s. So time and again, it seems that pirates fuck shit up. This is the phrase that one of my young entrepreneurs in Johannesburg gave me. And if anyone is from South Africa, you'll be very familiar with this. It's a term that means to positively go out and create change in the world. We're going to go fuck shit up. Actually, for him, it's the tagline of his business, which is great for South Africa. It's not going to translate so well when he expands internationally, but you know, you get the gist. And for me, it was a real compliment. It was a sign that I was testing this book as any of us would a product, you know, which isn't normally how books are written. It was a sign that I was on the right direction. The other quote that kind of sums up where I'm coming from is this, the much more famous Steve Jobs quote. That Jobs flew above the famous 2-day away day where Apple finally cracked it and changed the world forever as a result. And it's actually the quote I put on the pitch document that I made, assuming, you know, I was just like a mock-up like we all make. You know, you make up a quote for the mock-up. And a few people told me to take it off earlier on, but it was still early days, so I didn't. And then I crossed some kind of line where everyone assumed I must have permission for it. So it's made it onto the actual cover of the book. But it's out in the US soon, so I imagine I'll be getting sued. As well as the interesting research that I discovered about pirates and their history, I also discovered some pirate economists. Pirate economists. Who knew there were pirate economists? There are, my friends, pirate economists. And they argue that the role of pirates is essential in all innovation and development, to, on the edges, in the dark, in the shadows, to create real challenge that drives all of our organizations further, faster forward than anything else. And just look at the breakup of the BBC's monopoly from actual real pirate radio, or the fact that Steve Jobs showed LimeWire to the music industry execs when he outlined iTunes to them, or the biggest advances in biotechnology have been made in pirate kitchens, or the fact that Elon Musk won't patent his rockets because it's the fastest way that anyone can pirate them. You know, pirates push us further forward, and if we think that innovation takes place in corporate venturing or labs, we are mistaken as to where real innovation can play. Real innovation can play, and it does, in the shadows, in the dark. And it is worth us knowing that and looking to it to learn. I think the need is now. 300 years on, exactly, from the depth of the Golden Age, the world looks disturbingly similar. Backdrop of international interconnected conflict that's so confusing no one really knows what's right or wrong. A self-interested establishment who really only have their best interests at heart. And a generation locked out of its own future because the pirates were the millennials of their age. The average age of a pirate was 28. And this group rejected the rules of the day, and set out to create some new ones. And that's really the message. It's not the rule breaking, that's kind of the exciting start. It's the rule remaking that makes pirates the role models of our hour, to prove that you can create a new social code, a new social contract, a new way of organizing, a new way of being. And that power, that influence of something that's new can create ripples that affect the center. All of those innovations began with pirates. They've all become the norm. There is a chance to create real change by stepping outside, not believing the way things are, the way things have to be, breaking some rules to create some new ones, some new precedents. That is our opportunity. That, I think, is our responsibility. So does this stack up? Can I really make this comparison of the pirates and innovators of old and the pirates and innovators of new? Does that really play out? I really think so. I've kind of happened on this framework in the center of the book, and I know there's a slight irony to creating a set of rules for some pirates, but nonetheless. It begins with rebellion, the simple act of rebellion. And I've got no shortage of modern pirates that step up to this role. Do you know this guy? This is the Wolf of Walthamstow, as he's known. Young Tommy was excluded from school age because he'd just turned over £25,000 on his tuck shop empire when the headmaster found out. Why do you exclude him at that point? This boy was failing within school anyway. Here he was finding success, the kind of success that actually our economy needs, and we exclude him. But the beginning of the whole pirate framework is just simply that, finding rules, stupid rules to break. And then immediately it becomes about rewriting them, because piracy is a creative act if done properly. This guy, Chance the Rapper, the first and only musician on earth to ever win a Grammy without a record deal. No physical music product whatsoever, and won a Grammy, the highest accolade. And in that moment also, with a level of political and creative freedom that no artist has, puts millions into the Chicago and public health system and campaigned tirelessly with the Obamas. And so this guy that millions look up to, I want to be the next Chance the Rapper, the dream is no longer to get signed. And a new rule is written, and a new model is written. Then there's the level of reorganization. Pirates didn't take on scale by meeting it with scale. The notion of scale is one of the biggest rules we need to challenge and change. The idea of scale is getting us into some of the biggest problems that we face. The paradox of scale is what I think we need to embrace. Networks. Pirate crews were about 80 to 200. So this is a large pirate crew, right? We could all be on a nice big three-master. This would be a good crew. I'd be part of this crew. But when they needed to, they could assemble into thousands, so they could take on almighty odds. It took them just weeks to go into cellular structures, to take on huge organizations, and then disassemble. They didn't have to be at the same scale as everyone else. This is one of my favorite pirate networks. They're called Young Founders. Everyone work with Young Founders? They're set up by a chap called Kit Fraser. He made £6 million off his first and only business that he sold when he was 16, and he found himself in a very strange and isolated place. So he created an online forum for 15 and 16-year-olds who had invested businesses, but their friends, educators, and parents didn't take them seriously. Just to check that, 15 and 16-year-olds with invested businesses whose friends, parents, and educators can't take them seriously. We host them at Liberty several times. Usually we can only accept about 5% of the applications they get because there's so many of these guys out there. I mentored this wonderful young man for a while called Paul. He had over 100,000 euros invested in his business. I convinced him that he should talk to his business studies teacher because what he needed was time. He was doing this thing all through the night. He couldn't do his studies. And his business studies teacher proved him right and me wrong by giving him double business studies as a way of supporting him. We are so far away from the opportunity that is so beneath our noses. And it doesn't matter because whilst we are slow, they are fast. These networks organize at such pace every single place I found them. And then this notion of redistribution of power and of opportunity, this is fundamental to the way that pirates operated. We all know that with great ideas over time, they can all become corrupted. But the pirates bake this in, and this is something that we all need to challenge and question. How do our ideals stay pure and true? Because we have the biggest notions to change the world, but we all know how they get compromised. This is Alessandra. She started Mio Rio, one of the most successful political digital democracy platforms in the world. Out of Rio de Janeiro, then moved to Sao Paulo, and now to every single Latin American city, giving a political voice to young people in a continent where it almost is non-existent. And then the final of those 5 stages is the one where we all come in. The power of tall tales. Pirates were master storytellers, master marketeers, way before Byron Sharp, demonstrating exactly the same notions of mental availability. And this, of all the modern pirates, is my favorite story. This is Audrey Tang, who led the Sunflower Revolution in Taiwan. At 20 years old, the Taiwan democracy was under threat, and Audrey Tang and some of her fellow coders decided that they would tell a story which would prove to government the power of true democracy. So they made a fake website for the entire Taiwanese government. And then they created some stories that flew on social media that the government had had a turn of attitude and was inviting the population to come and set the national budget. And of course, millions of people came to the fake website and set the national budget. And so rather than the net threat that had been going on of democracy being removed, you now had the biggest ever participative process of budget setting. Audrey and her co-conspirators took this to government, and it was implemented. And she became the world's first transgender digital minister and is the reason that Taiwan is #1 in the world's digital transparency stakes. The power of incredible storytelling of these young rebels who are willing to take risks, step outside the rules as we understand them, and prove that all of this technology ladders up to more than shifting units. It's about shifting mindsets, and it's about shifting the rules of what comes next. It's very easy to stand here and suggest to you that you should take all of this on board and perhaps break some rules yourself, but that would be unfair. So I'd like to finish by demonstrating to you that I've lived this myself. I am absolutely 100% of this. The book was out in May, as I said. So in the beginning of the year, I was given my budget. Well, I wasn't given a budget. It doesn't go to me. I'm just used to it coming to me from my agency. So I saw a non-budget go to somebody else, and I wasn't involved in it. And I was giving a talk, not dissimilar to this, to the team at Penguin Random House, who are my wonderful publishers that I'm very grateful to. And I was in this room, looking out of that window that would be behind there. And all I could think was back to my early days, the Don't Panic days, the club promoter days. And I was thinking, as that window looks out onto Vauxhall Bridge Road and its 6 lanes of traffic and the huge footfall, wouldn't that look good if I could fly poster it? That would be amazing. That's what I'd like to do. So I found the facilities manager and said, is there any chance I could put something in that window? Could I do a little installation for a nice bit of out of home? And he nearly chased me out. This is a listed building, health and safety, Westminster Council. Blah, blah, blah. And something's dawned on me, which is a little hack that you might find useful, kind of in trying to push things in marketing. Every time I've heard a no, I've pretended that I heard go. It's quite useful. And you can then apologize. So sorry, thought you said go. Anyway, it really, really works. So Tom Weldon, who's the chief exec of Penguin Random House, had asked me out for breakfast. I was delighted. I really, really respect and admire Tom. He had read the book, and he was interested in my perspectives as a marketeer and entrepreneur becoming an author. What did I think about the publishing industry and the current state of affairs? So of course I had much to say. Shared my views with him, and he asked if I would come in and present that to the leadership team. So I said, of course I will, Tom, but I'd have to charge you a fee. He said, a fee? You do know we're just putting your book out, don't you? And I said, yeah, of course, but I need £1,743. He said, that's very specific. What do you want to do? I didn't tell him. I couldn't tell him. But I went away and I wrote a letter from him, but written by me. And you can tell it's a forgery, written by me. I'm terribly dyslexic, so it's got typos all over it. And you wouldn't expect the CEO of a literary company to make typos, but nonetheless, no one checked that. Then I went and ordered the banner that I wanted, the fly poster, and then I went on Amazon and I bought 5 high-vis vests. So the morning of the launch, me and the lads popped down there and began to install the brightest, pinkest, most fluorescent high-vis banner that I possibly could. It's the size of a Routemaster bus. The power of a high-vis vest, my friend. Not a one. No one even challenged us. And as the day wore on, and we ran away as quickly as we could and went back to Liberty's office in Brixton and hid, and it was frighteningly cold. Only one person at Penguin knew that I was doing this. And then I had a few people lined up throughout the day who began to share the story, and by about 4 o'clock it was going quite well on social media. And then it kicks off, because at exactly 4 p.m, Branson himself retweets the thing. Kind of taking credit for it in a bit of a weird way, but nonetheless, Richard Branson retweets the thing, and the book shoots into the top 100 books, and by 5:30 that afternoon, it's number 81, right? In book terms, it's absolutely extraordinary. There's about 500 books came out last Thursday. I mean, Joe Wicks has got 71 books in the top 100 as it is. I mean, so defied all possible expectations. Tom calls me up. Congratulations, but now take it down. I managed to get away with keeping it up there for another 2 weeks. And so it continued. I realized I was really, really onto something. Next up was Blinkist. Has anyone got Blinkist on their phone? So Blinkist is every single marketing, management, leadership book dissected to 7-minute podcast, which, let's be honest, most marketing, management, leadership books should be a 7-minute podcast, you know. Give or take quite a few of them. So I had this great idea. I thought, wonderful, we should work with Blinkist. And I spoke to the guys at Penguin about it, and they said, absolutely not. They're out there stealing IP from authors. They're like the Spotify of the music industry. So you do realize what you just said there, don't you? So I called them immediately. They'd never heard from an author before. They said, everybody hates us. They said, yes, because they think that you're stealing their stuff. How about we do something different? And I wrote my own 7-minute version. We gave a discount code at the end of it. I made quite a lot of it exclusive and new material. We released on Blinkist the next day after the UK launch. They're 4 million subscribers. It was the biggest retail driver that suddenly took me to an international audience. And so it continued. When you hear no, we hear. So then I found out about Waterstones, right? How many books do you think your average Waterstones shop buys of a brand new book from an unknown author? First order. Where's the statisticians in the house? 10? The statistically improbable number of 1. Anyway, so I took a bunch of books down to Waterstones and made my own display. Jordan Peterson was out that week, so I took over that little thing because it's a good book. He's a dick. And I made a little window display down here, which then got me nearly arrested, but I could prove that I had more stock than they did. And so it continued. And then this is the kind of final part of the story, which really I think connects back to today. Somebody started buying from me. I had to build my own website because for talks like today, authors usually, this is one of the ways that authors get paid because books don't make very much money, but the book sales don't contribute to data because there's a very strange thing going on that publishing still spends about 70%, there's a good opportunity actually, publishing still spends most of its money on outdoor because they can't get any data because Amazon sells most of the books and Amazon doesn't give them any data back. There's a pitch there for anybody waiting to try and crack it. So to crack it, I built my own shop so that I could understand what was driving sales as a proxy that then we could go and inform the stuff we were doing. When sales came to me, I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't believe it. Someone's bought my book? Really? So I sent them a note, a handwritten note, because I was so touched. And then the sales started flooding in. And once I started, I realized I couldn't stop because 35% of books that get bought from me that I hand wrap in skulls, wax seal, and send with a handwritten note get a post. And we all know the power of micro-influence, and we all know, because we all pitch it, the power of experience. And that's what today has all been about, human first. So I spent all this time doing these stunts. I tested out all this stuff, all these mirrored audiences, every single bit of retargeting, and nothing works as well. And this is from my own product with my own money, as well as those. They are the single biggest driver of sales out of anything that we do, of organic growth, of traffic, and everything else, the human experience shared to its own network. But that didn't stop me with some of the stunts. The book got signed to a US publisher. I was very, very happy. I closed the deal the week before a certain American was visiting town. So I thought, well, here's another opportunity to get the high-vis vests out. We made a little banner and we projected it against Parliament. And I thought on this one we were really going to get in trouble. But it turns out high-vis vests you can really get away with near murder. Then it was Talk Like a Pirate Day a few weeks ago, and we needed another little boost to keep that top funnel going. So I borrowed the advertising on the underground. Apologies to anyone who was running a campaign on that day. But it went really, really well. And you know that whole thing of identifying your target audience? If there was a perfect member of my target audience, it's this wonderful, beautiful specimen of a man here. And you get the gist, right? This is how I've approached this. 20 years of running my own agencies, 20 years of falling into the trap of some of the same bullshit we always say, 20 years of following the trends and being at smart conferences and regurgitating them. Suddenly it's all back on me. It's my money, it's my book, it's my product, it's my life on the line. And all of it comes back to the single thing, what today is all about. The thing that drove the success of this book, that's kept it as a bestseller, that's got me numerous international deals, is it all boils down to the human experience. Nothing else. Everything else is useful, but can also be a distraction. And the result that I've kept it so absolutely human, so absolutely authentic to the book, is this. And this is the final part of the story. I got this email just after the book was out, after that first stunt and the first huge spike in sales. Dear Sam, ahoy Sam, because that's how they all begin. I want you to know how much of your book has influenced me. It's really, really great. Reading this led me to handing in my notice that very evening. Thanks for putting my priorities in check. I needed reminding. She forwarded me her resignation letter. I was like, what? I didn't mean it. Except, of course, I did. That's absolutely what I fucking meant. You can feel it, right? I totally mean this. I've spent 20 years working in and around all of this stuff, and I feel like I can see exactly the direction of travel we need to go. So by God, I spoke to her immediately, made sure she didn't have many dependents and knew where she was going next, right? So I could mentor and work with her to get there. But then I got distracted because I got another message, this time on LinkedIn. Hey, Sam, just finished reading Be More Pirate. You know what? Thanks to you, I've walked the plank and left my corporate job. What now? I had to run over here. Wait a minute, mate. What's your plan? What are you doing? But then I couldn't stop because I got another message, this time on Twitter. Oh, fuck. You know, this time it's Weird Naked Man who's written his rebellion inside the book. I'm going to fuck up the fixed odds one. What? And then it continues. Oh, my God, over here we've got this amazing young woman. Her friend has been detained at Yarl's Wood. Her best friend is Nigerian descent but grown up in England her entire life, has been illegally detained. 3 months she spent in prison. And they used the 5R framework to create the campaign that then got her released. And we've now succeeded in getting her indefinite leave to remain. So from one thing to the next, from big campaigns to small campaigns, to rules that need breaking, from status quos that damn well need challenging, the book's beginning to have an effect, right? Then I'm being called into business. This is Lego's future laboratory. They called me in to run the workshop I talk about in the book. I didn't have the heart to tell them it wasn't a real workshop. I was like workshopping, but it's Lego, right? What a great gig. So I made it up on the plane. And now I find myself running this within corporates who all accept what I said at the beginning, that the rate of pace outside the window is far faster than any of us can stay near inside. So perhaps the notion of professional rule breaking, perhaps the notion of a modern mutiny has got a handle. They can all be summed up. I find myself now in this very strange place. Yesterday it hit 401 in my folder of rebellion in my Gmail account. 401. Just sold less than 20,000 books in the UK, which by book terms is good. Sounds relatively low, no? By book terms it's good. Which means, in our world, which is the only kind of metric I know, I've got a 2% return on rebellion rate. And if that was an on-pack, right, it'd be pretty fucking good, wouldn't it? But I don't, I mean, and I was just speaking to Sam from RocketMill earlier on, having heard some of those presentations, I really, really want some help with this. But I like this one. I thought this would make sense for you guys because tomorrow is day one. What a phrase. Tomorrow is day one. Someone is willing to step outside the way things were to create the way things can and should and could be. I don't care if the biggest rebellion people make is just the rebellion from their own self-imposed limitations. Some of them, of course, are taking on the Home Office. Some of them are rebellions on their high street. But there's something in the wind, my friends. We know it. Most of us feel it. There's a reason this book has had so much success, and it's not me. My little dyslexic chip on the shoulder argument about the world. It's because there's something far greater going on that we're all part of. A fight that's happening. A fight that humanity hasn't really seen probably since the Second World War. The risk, the stakes are just as high. We're all participants in it. We're all players in it. We will have a real choice to make it. And like I said earlier, when I say we, I mean you. There's a day one scenario, and I think it's coming. Do we want to end up not as statues for just following orders? Or inadvertently, will we know when it's the right thing to do, the wrong thing, and be ready to break the rules? Because sometimes, I think, being a pirate can be the very best thing that we can all do. With that, I'll say thank you very, very much indeed.